Hey kids, so yesterday, Kevin Reddington in the Lindsay Clancy case elicited testimony that has a lot of you really thinking Patrick Clancy might be guilty. So let's take a quick legal view.
This is Legal View, where we look at the news from a legal point of view.
All right, so yesterday Kevin Reddington was doing some cross-examination of a state's expert, and he elicited this testimony.
Once again, what it is that he said to her and what she said to him?
He said, "What did you do?" And she said, "I tried to kill myself." And then he said, "Where are the kids?" And she said, "In the basement."
Now, what is your source of that information, sir?
It was in the records, and I also did a collateral interview with Patrick Clancy.
Did you listen to the 911 tape?
No, I did not.
If I tell you, would you be surprised, sir, that she had significant damage, not only to her back, her spine, and was hemorrhaging, but also to her throat?
No, I would not be surprised. She injured herself very badly when she jumped out that window.
If I suggest to you, sir, that if you listen to the 911 tape as it relates to Patrick Clancy interacting with her, that she can only make grunting noises, would you be surprised at that?
I would be surprised, yes.
All right, so I know what you guys are feeling. I feel it too. Listen, I'm not part of the whole conspiracy theorist thing that Patrick Clancy is really the one responsible for this crime. I'm just not on that boat. But that testimony does raise some serious questions, right? It sounds like she wasn't able to really verbalize anything while she was on the ground. And so he says that she told him the kids were in the basement and that she tried to commit suicide or jumped out the window. Well, how did she say that if her injuries would have prevented her from doing anything but grunting? I get it. There's some other things. I've watched many videos by you guys doing some great work. It's not kind of stuff I do, but I've been watching some of you guys talking about timelines not matching up, some testimony not matching up, the fact that her DNA wasn't found on the murder weapons, those exercise bands, but his was. Now, there could be plenty of explanations for that, but it does raise questions. But I'm not here to talk about that specifically. I want to talk about whether Patrick Clancy can be found guilty of some other crime for leaving the children alone with her. Because quite frankly, do you really think that the type of attorney, the bulldog, that Kevin Reddington is, that if there was enough evidence to point to Patrick Clancy, he wouldn't be doing that to try to get his client off? Why wouldn't he do that? Why wouldn't the authorities decide to investigate him and charge him if all this evidence sort of added up? It's fine to think that you guys are the only ones sort of putting things together. I'm sure their investigators did the same thing. They have decided not to charge him. So I'm going to take their word for it. In this case, Kevin Reddington is not pointing the finger at him. I'm definitely going to take his word in this case. And he has stipulated in court that she is responsible for the death of the children. Why would he do that if he had other evidence? So let's just put that aside. You guys continue to work on it. And I'll tell you, I keep an open mind because the more I'm hearing, the more questions I have. But when I look at it from a legal point of view, in terms of what the law is in Massachusetts regarding this third party being responsible for the acts of someone else, I immediately think of the Crumbley case, the young man who shot up a school in Michigan. Jennifer and James Crumbley, they were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the death of the children who died in a school shooting done by their son. And also the case of Colin Gray in Maryland. He was found guilty of murder as well as involuntary manslaughter for a school shooting, the deaths of children in a school shooting committed by his son. Now, they don't line up perfectly, because in that case, both of them were the parents and had a duty to take care of the children who committed the crimes. And that was a part of finding them guilty of involuntary manslaughter. In this case, Patrick Clancy is not responsible for whatever Lindsay Clancy does or did beforehand. So the fact that she had mental health problems, he had no responsibility to take her and make sure that she got treatment for it. So the fact that if he would have ignored it, or which he didn't do, so that's different as well. We know the parents in the Gray case and in the Crumbley cases, they kind of ignored their kids' psychological issues, didn't take them to get help. In this case, he actually was taking her to get help, even though he had no obligation to. She was an adult. She had to take care of herself. So that's different. But still, he did have a duty to take care of the children. So the question is, did he violate any laws by leaving them with the mother, with the knowledge that she had given him that she was having these thoughts of hurting herself and hurting the children? Well, I can tell you, when you look at the involuntary manslaughter cases in Michigan and in Maryland, the big issue there was not only did they ignore the signs that their children had serious mental health issues and the signs that they were thinking of hurting someone and being violent, but they also gave them the instrumentality that they used to commit the crimes. The Crumbleys gave their son a gun, and Colin Gray gave his son an AR-15 rifle. Now, this was part of the lifestyle they were living. Guns were more a part of their lives, places where they lived. And in both instances, I think they both thought this was something that could help the child get away from some of the issues they may have been having. It's almost like you give someone a basketball or a soccer ball, they gave them a gun. Hey, not judging. So that was the big problem there. There's no evidence in this case that Patrick Clancy gave Lindsay Clancy the instrumentality used in this crime, those exercise bands. So that's a problem. But we can get back to the duty to take care of the children and keep them safe. And so the question becomes, did he breach that by leaving them with her with the knowledge that he had? Well, there become other questions here. Do we want the government to go into homes and charge parents with crimes for making bad decisions? Clearly, there are levels to bad decisions. In the Crumbley case, the bad decision was deciding not to take those kids to get help for their mental issues, and also giving them guns when they exhibited issues regarding propensity for violence. So you had issues of foreseeability there that were solved by the fact that they knew they were showing proclivities for violence, and then they gave them the instrumentality for the crimes that they committed. In this case, yes, there was a slight foreseeability, but very, very different, because when we talk about going from having postpartum depression, which he was aware of, because I said he went with her to all of her appointments, so he was aware of her struggle. She told him how she was feeling. But there's only really a 1% chance when a person has postpartum depression that they will go into a postpartum psychosis mode, which then could lead to something like the killing of the children. To say that Patrick Clancy would have had some foreseeability that this could have happened, I think is a stretch. Under Massachusetts law, there are two ways you can be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, both by an affirmative act or an omission. This would be a case of an omission. And under omission, there are four things that the prosecutor would have to prove. Number one, of course, that there was this omission. Number two, that you have this duty of care, which I think is clear. I think the omission is clear. But the third one, that the omission was an intentional act. And number four, that the omission was wanton and reckless. I think under that theory, when you look at the model jury instructions and the way the law is structured, I don't think they mean to punish bad decisions by parents. And I think, unfortunately, that's where this gets filed. It may be a decision he will rue the rest of his life. It may be a decision that will keep him in his own type of prison for the rest of his life. I don't know how it couldn't. But the law, the way it's structured, I'm not sure his actions meet that level. One of the other issues, of course, would be causation. The omission has to cause or be a cause of the death. Under these circumstances, where the act is of another adult making certain choices, and that would be Lindsay Clancy killing the children, under most circumstances, that is enough to cut off the causation of any omission of Patrick Clancy. It didn't work in the Colin Gray and in the Jennifer and James Crumbley cases because of their duty of care for the youth. And they were not considered adults, even though, and this I had a big issue with, they were tried as adults for the purposes of Jennifer and James Crumbley and Colin Gray. In their charging decisions, they were treated as juveniles who were under the care of adults. So do with that what you will. Under Massachusetts law, it's a really high standard as far as Patrick Clancy is concerned. When we talk about what he could have stopped under these circumstances, I've asked myself this question 1,000 times. What's a parent to do under these circumstances? I had a problem with the state initially going into the home and questioning parenting decisions of Jennifer and James Crumbley and Colin Gray. But as I got more into the facts, I got on board because they made some really bad decisions that I think rose to the level of a gross deviation from what a normal person would do, otherwise gross negligence. And giving them that gun, I think, rose to that level. Well, when you're in Massachusetts, it's not gross negligence, it's an even higher standard that Patrick Clancy would be judged on, and that's wanton and reckless. That takes it to another level. So you have to look at the decisions that he made. Were they wanton and reckless? So as you see here, this graphic defines the culpability differences between wanton and reckless and gross negligence. In Massachusetts, wanton and reckless conduct is intentional conduct by act or where there is a duty to act by omission that involves a high degree of likelihood that substantial harm will result to another. That's both a criminal and civil standard. In Michigan, gross negligence is defined as conduct so reckless that it demonstrates a substantial lack of concern for whether an injury results without requiring proof of actual intent. And again, that's both civil and criminal. Now, the key distinction is that Massachusetts requires conduct approaching intentional disregard of a known grave risk, a standard used in manslaughter cases. Michigan's test asks only whether the conduct shows indifference to safety with no requirement of intent. So the fact that his wife asked him to go get some food and some medicine, and he decides to go, he testified that after she told him that a few days before, she had said that she's okay and that she wasn't going to hurt the kids and she had it under control. And he was going along with his life believing that, choosing to believe that, and leaving the children that day, I don't think would rise to the level of a decision that would be considered wanton and reckless. It's a very, very high standard. So charging him under something like involuntary manslaughter, as far as he's responsible for his act or his omission to act, meaning staying home or not staying home, I think would be a very steep hill for prosecutors to climb. And it would seem odd that you would want to pile on to someone who's had that kind of loss after making a decision like that. Again, there are levels to bad decisions. Maybe it was a bad decision. I'm not even sure it was. Like I said, I've asked myself 1,000 times, what would I have done under those circumstances? And I think when we talk about this case, one of the main issues that's come out throughout, both in terms of Lindsay Clancy, but the family as a whole, was that the system let them down somewhat. I've talked to a couple of psychologists, including this interview that I did with Dr. Debbie Goodman, which is up on YouTube as well as on Substack. And we talked about there's a holistic approach that you take to mental health issues. And these doctors didn't take that. There's a claim that she was misdiagnosed, that's fine. And she didn't quite share all of her thoughts with other doctors. One of the reasons she explained to Dr. Zeisel was that she was afraid that if she told them she was hearing voices or thinking the things that she was thinking, they would take the kids away. But she didn't quite tell them, so the doctors didn't have a full picture. But when they talk about an holistic approach, is then you involve family members. You have to talk to them as well to see what they're seeing and hearing. Had they done that, they would have talked to Patrick Clancy. Patrick could have told them the things that she had been telling him, and then they could have put a family plan in place. Family plans in times like this, because people suffer with these thoughts, you just can't get away from it. A family plan would have been something like, if we see signs or she's talking this way, you have a plan for the children. So you take them to a friend's house for a little while, or to grandma and grandpa's house for a little while. We saw grandma and grandpa testifying in the trial. I'm sure they would have been very happy to take the kids for a little while. So had Patrick Clancy received, and Lindsay Clancy received that kind of care, maybe there would have been a plan in place. Maybe Patrick Clancy would have known, once he heard that from his wife, to take the kids away for a little while, just to make sure everything was okay, check in with the doctor. A lot of things he could have done. So one can say perhaps the level of care let down both Patrick Clancy and Lindsay Clancy. And I don't think the answer here is charging him for leaving the kids alone with her. What's a man to do? You know, it's a difficult question. I'm sure I might have gone to, after a couple of days, he was talking about the fact that over those couple of days she was doing extremely well. There is something in psychology or psychiatry that suggests the worst of mental health issues happen after the best days. But how's Patrick Clancy supposed to know that? You know, there was really no way to predict. The foreseeability wasn't there. And I don't think the decision rises to the level required by Massachusetts law to charge him. I'm not saying leave Patrick Clancy alone, but I'm saying leave Patrick Clancy alone. If you find some evidence, if the timelines and everything come together and we figure out that there's enough evidence there to suggest he really was the one responsible for the crime. And look, it's not that far-fetched of an idea, to be honest with you. He could have been tired of dealing with those mental health issues. It's a devastating thing to deal with. It's a very heavy burden for him, and I get it. He may have wanted out. I don't know the timeline for this other relationship that he ended up marrying somebody else, divorcing Lindsay Clancy. I don't know whether some of that started before all of this happened. If that happened, that's certainly something you throw in the pot and saying, hey, maybe he had a lot of incentive to sort of produce this kind of result. The other thing that came up was her body was in the snow for not a very long time, and her body temperature, or at least the understanding was it wasn't a very long time, but her body temperature suggested she would have had to have been out there a much longer time. And they likened it to the Karen Reed case when her boyfriend was outside for 6 hours and his body temperature was about the same as hers. And she was maybe out there for, you know, maybe 30 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, I don't know. But so there's a lot there. So keep digging, folks. And I'll do the law thing. And right now I'm not finding any way to get him charged. And I'm not sure that would be the right thing anyway in this case. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. And once again, keep it here at Legal View for the legal view of all this true crime news. I'm Michael Ayala. Thanks for watching.
Legal View, where we view the news through the lens of the law.